in order to have a contract, there must be two living, breathing people in order for there to be a conversation, such as a Shogun. If you and I were going to contract, I'd need to be able to ask you, what do you mean by this word? You need to be able to ask me, what do you mean by this word? If we can't have that conversation, then that would mean that there's an awful lot of ambiguity in the wording, and especially in the essence of, say, like you were just reading something off of a piece of paper, ink on paper. There's no agent that's going to be able to explain to you what some of these words mean. Say, like you're in a courtroom and they have you doing a plea deal, and they've got this ink on paper in front of you, and they're asking you to initial and sign and all this other shit. If you ask, what do you mean by this word? They will quickly dodge that question. In fact, they will dodge it so quickly that they will say, oh, well, if you don't understand what that word means, you need to get yourself an attorney so that they can help you. We're not going to give you legal advice. Well, that's a problem. I didn't ask you legal advice. You're the one who's acting like the guy that's negotiating this contract with me. I want to know what you, the really living, breathing man, means by this word. Oh, you didn't write that word. It was written by somebody else that you don't even know. So you can't ask them what that word means. But yet I'm standing in front of you asking what it means. But now you want me to go and find an attorney to ask that attorney what that word means that somebody else wrote that you don't know? Because isn't it a matter of whoever wrote that word, what they meant by that word? And if you didn't write it, then how could you know?
So let's move to the third topic here, which is the money. So how does the money come into the picture?
Okay, well, the money is, and actually let's slide it back just a little bit on the ownership, because this is one of the big things here. No, in my estimation, we can't own anything. Of course, we just talked about the legal name. If you use the name to buy something, it would seem to me that whoever owns the name that you use to buy that piece of property owns that piece of property. But here's the real crux of the issue, because when it comes down to the money, this is how they really kind of put the hooks into each and every one of us. And I say each and every one of us because no matter how much of this stuff I have gleaned for myself and can apply on a daily basis, when it comes time to do certain things and certain transactions, I cannot get it done unless I use something known as a Federal Reserve note. In fact, if I want to go and buy some cannabis flower, even though I do grow my own upon occasion, I will go get some because I want something different, or I run out, whatever the case may be. I cannot walk out of that pharmacy if I do not walk in with Federal Reserve notes and have flour in my pocket when I walk out. They won't let me do it. We're all stuck into this certain thing. But the reality of it is, when we look at what is money, money is a very ambiguous term, because money is only what two people will agree upon at the time of what is known as formation, going back to a contract. Part of the meeting of the minds is, if I want to sell you my house and you've got a peppercorn, little black, yummy, crush it up, put it on the steak peppercorn, this in legal terms is also known as sufficient consideration. That's money. The peppercorn is the money from you to me. The house is my money from me to you. This is also known as legal detriment. I'm losing something, you're losing something, we both also gain something. That's money. Money is nothing more than that. There is no set, automatic, whatever. In fact, there's two different so-called pieces of legislation that ultimately culminate into one final. The first would be HJR 192, which essentially abrogates gold. In HJR 192, it says no debt can ever be paid. The only thing that can ever be done with a debt is it can either be set off or discharged. The next piece of legislation that derived from that was Public Law 7310, said the same basic thing. Now those have been codified into Title 31, Section 5118. The problem with Title 31, Section 5118 is some of that very ambiguous language to where when you read it, even though I know they're being ambiguous and I have legal dictionaries to my access, when I read it, I'm confused because they try to make it extremely confusing when they write that. But it still says the same thing. Nobody can demand a specific form of payment. They can't tell you, you need to give me this or you need to give me that. They cannot demand that you hand them a so-called Federal Reserve note. They cannot demand that you hand them gold or silver because there is codes, laws, whatever you want to call it. When they say a dollar, as far as I can tell, a dollar has been defined as many different things, but the ultimate basis of a dollar is it's a unit of measure. Well, if somebody asks me for a gallon of something, I'm going to ask a gallon of what? If somebody asks me for a pound of something, I'm going to ask a pound of what? Well, if a dollar is a unit of measure and somebody asks you for a dollar or something, it would seem to me the best question to ask next is dollars of what? I've asked this question. I've asked it of judges. I've asked it of so-called probation officers and other people, banks, creditors. They flip out. They start assuming that you know. I've had people even tell me, oh, you know what they mean. Oh, really? Well, what do you mean by they? I asked you. They don't even want to answer it directly like, well, this is what I told you it was. No. They always refer to and defer off to, well, this is what somebody else has said. Yeah, I don't give a shit what somebody else is saying. You're the one making the claim against me that I owe something. You're saying I owe dollars of something. I want to know what you mean by dollars. Are you suggesting I should just assume what you mean? And if I'm going to just assume, can I just then give you anything? Can I give you grains of sand? How about coffee beans? Yeah, very, very interesting little problem with that because when it comes down to it, of course, if you read on the front of the so-called $1 Federal Reserve note, they all say it, but it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. It says all debts, too. Not just up to $1, all debt. Because go back to HGR 192, Title 31, Section 5118. Nobody can demand anything, and all debts can only be set off for discharge. Well, if you look in the UCC under what note is, just look up note alone. It's an IOU. But go ahead and do yourself a favor and look up every word in that phrase. It's not what people think. Again, this is all going right back to what we were originally talking about at the very beginning. Hearsay and assumption driven by linguistic sleight of hand. So here's the big thing at the very back end, kind of going back to the ownership. If the Federal Reserve note, which is the basic monetary system that we're all known to use, is an IOU, if it's not actually paying for something, are you actually buying anything? It seemed to me the answer would be no. And if you're not actually buying anything, this kind of goes back to ownership. Can you actually own it if you don't buy it?